I broke up with him just to see if he'd fight for me. He didn't even ask why, he just walked away. And honestly, 6 months later, I'm still not over it. I'm Cora, 26, and this whole disaster started when I decided to test my boyfriend's love for me. A real genius move, right? Lachlan and I had been together for a year and a half, and by all accounts, things were getting serious. We'd met each other's families, spent holidays together, and were even starting to float the idea of moving in. His parents absolutely adored me. His mom, Catherine, would text me recipes for her famous lemon meringue pie, and his dad would always save me the corner piece of the brownie pan at family dinners. His little sister, Tessa, who was sharp and funny, basically treated me like the older sister she'd never had. I really, truly thought we were building something real. But here's the thing about relationships that are good. Sometimes they get too comfortable. You know the feeling. We had our routines: Thai food on Tuesdays, farmers market on Saturday mornings, lazy Sundays spent reading in the same room, not saying a word, just existing together. It was nice. It was stable. But where was the passion? Where were the grand gestures? My entire social media feed was a highlight reel of epic romance. Friends posting incredible stories about how their boyfriends surprised them with weekend getaways to Napa, or wrote them songs on the guitar, or fought to win them back after earth-shattering arguments. Their love felt cinematic. It felt earned. Meanwhile, Lachlan was just reliable. He was steady. He showed up when he said he would, he remembered the name of my childhood dog, and he was genuinely kind to my friends. He was a good man. But I started to wonder, would he actually fight for me if he had to? I'd scroll through Instagram and see these couples posting tearful reunion selfies after a huge fight, with captions like, "So glad we fought for us. Number worth it." And something ugly and jealous would twist inside me. It was a dark, nagging thought. How do you know someone really loves you unless they have to prove it? Lachlan never had to prove it, because I never really pushed him. He had it too easy with me. That's what I started thinking. And once that thought took root, I couldn't shake it. It was like a weed in a perfect garden, slowly choking out everything healthy. So, I picked a random Tuesday evening. We'd had a perfectly nice weekend together. Nothing special, but nothing bad either. Just comfortable. I figured the unexpectedness of it, the sheer out-of-the-blue nature of the attack, would really drive home how serious I was. And therefore, how seriously he needed to take winning me back. I rehearsed my speech. I practiced looking sad but determined in the mirror. I invited him over to my place, my heart thumping with a strange mix of terror and anticipation. I was about to discover exactly how much Lachlan really loved me. Or so I thought. When Lachlan arrived at my apartment, he looked relaxed, completely unaware of the ambush waiting for him. He was holding a small bag from our favorite bakery. "They had the last almond croissant," he said with a smile. "I saved it for you." He leaned in to kiss me hello, like always, but I turned my face at the last second. His lips met my cheek instead. I saw the confusion flash across his face. A tiny flicker of hurt. Good, I thought, a cold part of me satisfied. He's already sensing something's wrong. This is going to work perfectly. "Lachlan," I began, my voice carefully modulated to sound somber and definitive. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." I paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang in the air. "And I don't think this is working anymore. I want to break up." There! I'd said it. I held my breath, waiting for the shock, the questions, the protests. In the movie I'd directed in my head, he was supposed to look stunned, maybe even tear up a little. He'd ask what went wrong, tell me how much he loved me, insist that we could work through whatever was bothering me. He'd say, "Cora, don't do this. I'll do anything." But that's not what happened at all. Lachlan just looked at me for a long moment. His expression shifted from surprise to something else, something calm and almost resigned. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Just that, "Okay." Like I just told him I didn't feel like Italian for dinner. I stared at him, waiting for more, but he just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, processing. No tears, no begging, no desperate questions about why, just quiet acceptance. My stomach dropped. This wasn't the script. This wasn't the script I'd written in my head at all. That's it? I finally asked, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. Just, okay? He shrugged, looking a little confused by my reaction. Well, if that's how you feel, Cora, I'm not going to try to change your mind. I respect your decision. Respect my decision? Who asked for respect? I wanted passion. I wanted a fight. I wanted him to throw the croissant on the floor and tell me I was crazy for even thinking this. I felt my cheeks get hot as a flood of anger and embarrassment washed over me. This was not how this was supposed to go. At all. So, you're just going to walk away? Just like that? My voice was rising now. After a year and a half together, I meant that little to you? Now, he looked genuinely puzzled. I don't understand. You just said you wanted to break up. I'm trying to respect that. You're supposed to fight for me. I finally blurted out, too frustrated to maintain the charade any longer. You're supposed to care enough to at least ask why or try to change my mind. His expression changed then. A flash of something, hurt, realization, disappointment, crossed his face. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Wait, he said softly. Was this some kind of test? I couldn't admit it outright. My pride wouldn't let me. No, I just thought if you really loved me, you'd at least want to know what went wrong, instead of just accepting it without a word. Lachlan stood up slowly, running a hand through his hair. The calm demeanor was still there, but now it was edged with a new firmness. Cora, relationships don't work like that. You can't just say you want to break up when you don't mean it and expect me to somehow read your mind. He walked towards the door. I think I should go, he said quietly. I'll box up anything of yours that might be at my place. You can pick it up whenever, or I can drop it off. That's when I really panicked. He was actually leaving. So that's it? I cried out, my voice cracking. You're just going to walk away after everything we've been through? Lachlan paused at the door and looked back at me, his eyes filled with a sadness that felt more final than any anger could have. You said you wanted to break up. I'm respecting your decision. What else am I supposed to do? You're a cold-hearted jerk who was just using me this whole time, I shouted, desperate to get some kind of emotional reaction from him. You never really loved me at all. He just shook his head, a look of profound weariness on his face. I'm not going to do this, Cora. When you're ready to have an honest conversation, let me know, but I don't play games. And then he left. He actually left. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the sudden, crushing silence of my apartment. No tears, no begging, no grand gestures. He just walked away. Like I hadn't just detonated our entire relationship. I spent that night alternating between crying and fuming, waiting for a call or text that never came. By morning, I was convinced. His reaction just proved what I'd suspected all along. He didn't love me enough. A man who truly loved a woman would never, ever let her go that easily. Right? The morning after our breakup, I was already spinning the story to my friends. I had to get control of the narrative, fast. He just didn't care enough to even ask why. I told my best friend Rowan, over coffee. My voice was thick with manufactured grief. Can you believe that? I tell him I want to break up and he just says okay and leaves. No questions, no nothing. Rowan frowned, stirring her latte. She was always on my side, but even she looked a little perplexed. Wait. So, you wanted to break up with him, but you're upset that he accepted it? I rolled my eyes dramatically. It's not about that, Rowan. It's about the principle. If he really loved me, he would have at least wanted to know why. He would have tried to fix things. As the days passed, I carefully crafted my version of events for different audiences. To his sister Tessa, who texted me 3 days later asking what happened, I was vague and sorrowful. There had been problems brewing for a while, I texted back. It's just so sad. His mom was upset, Tessa said. She'd really liked me. Great, I thought. Now his whole family probably thinks I'm the bad guy. To mutual friends, I hinted that Lachlan had been emotionally unavailable, a classic, unprovable accusation. To coworkers, I just shrugged and said with a sigh, sometimes things just don't work out. Each time I positioned myself as the reasonable, heartbroken party who had tried to make things work while painting Lachlan as cold, indifferent, and emotionally stunted. But not everyone bought my story. His sister Tessa called me a week after the breakup. Her tone was completely different from her text. I talked to Lachlan, she said, without any preamble. He told me what really happened. No. My stomach dropped. I don't know what he told you, but he said you broke up with him as some kind of test, she interrupted, her voice uncharacteristically hard. To see if he'd fight for you. Is that true? That's not. He's twisting what happened. I sputtered, my mind racing for a believable lie. Stop lying, Cora, Tessa said. And her voice was so cold it gave me chills. Do you have any idea how manipulative that is? To end a relationship you don't actually want to end just to test someone's reaction? She hung up. I stared at my phone in shock. How dare she speak to me like that? And how dare Lachlan tell her the truth instead of sticking to my version of events? Furious and wounded, I immediately went on social media. I posted a vague but clearly sad status. Sometimes the people you think care about you the most are the first to walk away when things get tough. I added a broken heart emoji for good measure. The likes and sympathetic comments poured in. You deserve better, one friend wrote. His loss, said another. This was more like it. This was the validation I craved. But not all my friends were so supportive. My roommate from college, Sutton, who had always been painfully honest, texted me privately. Did you actually want to break up with him, or was this some kind of test? I texted back defensively. It's not wrong to want someone to fight for you. Her reply came back instantly. No, but it is wrong to manipulate someone like that. If you wanted more romance or reassurance, you should have just told him. I threw my phone onto the couch, irritated. What did she know? She was single. She didn't understand the complexities of a long-term relationship. She didn't understand what I needed. But, as the days turned into weeks with no contact from Lachlan, a terrifying reality began to sink in. He wasn't going to come crawling back. He wasn't going to show up at my door with flowers and a tearful apology. He wasn't going to blow up my phone begging for another chance. I'd broken up with him, and he'd simply accepted it and moved on. That's when the real panic set in. I might have actually lost him for good. And over what? A stupid, childish test that any reasonable person would see right through? What had I been thinking? Pride is a powerful, poisonous thing. Even as the panic clawed at my throat, I couldn't bring myself to reach out and admit my mistake. Instead, I doubled down. I launched a one-woman social media campaign designed to show Lachlan, who I knew still followed me, that I was living my best life without him. I posted photos of glamorous nights out with friends, new outfits, fancy cocktails at rooftop bars. Every post was carefully curated to scream, "I'm thriving, you're missing out." In reality, I was a wreck. I was checking his profiles obsessively, dissecting every post for any sign that he was miserable without me. But his feed remained frustratingly normal. Work updates. A hiking trip with friends. A photo of a new pasta dish he'd cooked. There were no sad songs, no melancholy quotes, nothing to indicate he was pining for me. It was infuriating. 1 month after our breakup, I still hadn't heard directly from him. I'd run into a few mutual friends who had seen him, and their reports were like little daggers to my heart. He seems good, they'd say. Or worse, he asked about you. Hopes you're doing well. Hopes I'm doing well? He should be devastated. He should be a complete mess. I decided it was time to orchestrate a chance encounter. I knew his routine. I knew where he got his coffee on Saturday mornings, which grocery store he preferred, his favorite bookstore. I started frequenting these places, dressed to kill, hoping to bump into him accidentally on purpose. After 3 failed attempts, it finally worked. I spotted him at the local farmer's market, examining a pile of Honeycrisp apples at a produce stand. My heart raced as I approached, trying to appear casual and breezy. "Lachlan, what a surprise," I said, feigning shock at seeing him. He looked up, momentarily startled. "Cora, hi. How have you been?" I asked, stepping a little closer, letting him get a good look at my new dress. "I'm okay," he said with a small, polite nod. "You?" "Oh, keeping busy," I said with a practiced, airy laugh. "Listen, I think we should talk about what happened. It was just a big misunderstanding." "Oh, King." Lachlan raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" I nodded eagerly, sensing an opening. "Yes, I didn't. I didn't really want to break up. I was just going through something. Having a bad day, you know how at Island." He looked at me, his gaze steady and measured. "So, you didn't mean it when you said you wanted to end our relationship?" "Not really," I admitted, my voice dropping to a softer, more intimate tone. "I was just testing you, I guess. Seeing if you'd fight for me." Something shifted in his expression then. A hardening around his eyes, a slight tightening of his jaw. He didn't look angry. He looked clear. "I've been seeing a therapist these past few weeks," he said, the words surprising me completely. "Talking about our relationship, about patterns I didn't notice before." My heart leaped with a sudden, wild hope. "You're in therapy? Because of our breakup?" Maybe he was devastated after all. "Not exactly," he said, his voice calm and even. "I'm in therapy because I realized I have a pattern of being with women who test me instead of communicating directly, who expect me to read their minds, who create problems so I can solve them and prove my devotion." I felt my face flush. "That's not what I—" "When you broke up with me as a test," he continued, his voice never rising, "it was like a wake-up call. I realized how unhealthy our dynamic had become. How I was always on edge, always trying to guess what you really wanted instead of you just telling me. And Cora, I respect myself too much now to go back to that." He picked up an apple, examining it. "If you really care about someone, you don't play games with their feelings." "It wasn't a game," I protested weakly. "I just needed to know you cared." "By hurting both of us?" he asked, finally looking me in the eye. "That's not love, Cora. That's insecurity." The tears started to sting my eyes. So you're saying there's no chance for us?" Lachlan sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I'm saying I need someone who says what they mean and means what they say. Someone who doesn't use breaking up as a manipulation tactic." He paid for his apples, wished me well, and walked away again. Only this time it felt much, much more final. I stood there among the weekend shoppers, feeling oddly hollow. He had changed somehow in our weeks apart. He'd become more certain, more grounded. Meanwhile, I was still playing the same old games, expecting different results. For the first time, a sliver of terrifying self-awareness pierced through my wall of denial. Maybe, just maybe, I was the problem. That moment of self-awareness was fleeting. As I walked home alone, my pride reasserted itself, twisting my thoughts. Lachlan was being unreasonable. So I'd made one mistake. Was he really going to throw away everything we had over it? If he really loved me, he would forgive me, right? This line of thinking started a downward spiral that consumed the next several weeks of my life. I became obsessed with getting him back, not because I had actually learned from my mistake, but because his rejection only made me want him more. The fact that he was moving on while I was stuck made me frantic. I started texting him more frequently. Casual at first. "Hey, saw this and thought of you." Then increasingly desperate. "I really miss you, Lachlan. Can we please just talk?" His responses grew shorter and less frequent until finally, he asked me directly to give him space. But I couldn't. I convinced myself that persistence was the key. That if I just showed him how much I cared, he'd have to take me back. I read articles about winning your ex back. I joined online forums where people shared reconciliation success stories. I even bought a book called Make Him Come Crawling Back. My friends started to distance themselves. Rowan would politely decline my invitations, saying she was busy. All I ever talked about was Lachlan and my crazy schemes to get him back, and I could see the pity and exhaustion in her eyes. My work suffered too. I was late 3 times in 1 week because I'd stayed up all night stalking his social media and slept through my alarm. Then came the breaking point. I heard through a mutual friend that Lachlan had been promoted at work, something he'd been working toward for a long time when we were together. In my twisted logic, I decided this was the perfect opportunity. I would congratulate him in person. It would be a grand romantic gesture. I showed up at his workplace around closing time. I was holding a small, tastefully wrapped gift and a card. I'd put on his favorite dress of mine and spent hours on my hair and makeup. This will remind him of what he's missing, I thought. I'm sure of it. When he walked out of the building and saw me waiting by the entrance, his expression wasn't pleased or even surprised. It was wary, almost resigned. Cora? What are you doing here? He asked, his voice low, glancing around uncomfortably as his colleagues passed by. I heard about your promotion, I said brightly, holding out the gift. I wanted to congratulate you in person. No. This isn't appropriate, he said quietly, not taking the gift. I asked you to give me space. But I'm just being friendly, I insisted, feeling a wave of desperation as I saw the plan crumbling before my eyes. We can still be friends, right? No, Cora, we can't, he said firmly. Not right now. A few of his coworkers had slowed their pace, obviously eavesdropping. The heat of embarrassment and anger flooded through me. Fine, I said, my voice rising. Keep acting like you're so perfect. Like you never made any mistakes in our relationship. I'm going to go now, Lachlan said, his voice controlled but tight. Please don't come to my workplace again. As he turned and walked toward the parking lot, something in me snapped. I followed him, raising my voice. You think you're too good for me now? With your fancy promotion? You wouldn't even have applied for it if I hadn't encouraged you. That. He turned back, and for the first time, I saw real, undisguised anger in his eyes. Stop. Now. A small crowd of his colleagues had gathered, watching the spectacle I was creating. One woman, someone I'd never seen before, stepped forward slightly. Should I call security, Lachlan? The humiliation of that moment hit me like a physical blow. The gift fell from my hands as I turned and hurried away, tears of shame and rage streaming down my face. I had become the crazy ex-girlfriend, making a scene in public. Later that night, I received a text from Lachlan. It was short and utterly devastating. Don't contact me again. If you do, I'll have to take more formal steps to enforce that boundary. He was threatening me with a restraining order. Me, the woman he'd said he loved just a few months ago. It was too much to bear. I shut myself in my apartment for the entire weekend, ignoring calls from concerned friends, eating ice cream straight from the container, and watching sad romantic movies where the guy always came back in the end. But as Sunday evening approached, a hard, cold truth began to settle in my gut. Donovan wasn't coming back. And maybe, just maybe, this whole situation was more my fault than I had ever wanted to admit. 6 months after our breakup, I was invited to a housewarming party thrown by mutual friends. I knew there was a chance Lachlan might be there, but I'd been avoiding social gatherings for so long that I decided to risk it. Besides, I told myself, I looked good these days. I'd lost weight, mostly from stress, and bought a new outfit specifically for occasions where I might run into him. I arrived fashionably late, making an entrance I hoped would be noticed. The host greeted me warmly and led me to the drink table. As I scanned the room, my breath caught in my throat. That's when I saw him. Lachlan was standing by the window, laughing at something someone had said. But it wasn't just any someone, it was a woman I didn't recognize. Pretty in an effortless way, with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Who's that? I asked the host, trying to sound casual. Oh, that's Lachlan's girlfriend, Juliet, she said. They've been dating for a couple of months now. She's really cool. You'll like her. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Girlfriend? He had a girlfriend already? I downed my drink in one gulp and immediately reached for another. Throughout the evening, I watched them from across the room, a silent, jealous observer. I watched the way he looked at her, the casual intimacy of his hand on the small of her back, the way she made him laugh, a real, genuine laugh I recognized from happier times. The worst part wasn't just that he had moved on, it was how healthy they looked together. There was none of the drama, none of the tension that had slowly crept into my relationship with him. They communicated easily, checking in with each other without seeming clingy. When she spoke, he listened attentively. "They're good together, aren't they?" a voice said beside me. I turned to find Tessa, Lachlan's sister, watching me with a knowing look. "I guess," I said, trying to sound indifferent. "He's happy," she said simply. "Happier than I've seen him in a long time." The implication hung in the air between us. Happier than when he was with me. "Good for him," I said tightly. Tessa sipped her drink. "You know, the whole story came out about why you two really broke up." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Your test," she said, her voice flat. "How you broke up with him just to see if he'd fight for you. I mentioned it to a friend months ago, and you know how news travels in this group." Horror washed over me as I realized why some people at the party had been giving me strange looks all night. They all knew. They knew I was the toxic ex who played mind games. "That's not exactly how it happened," I started, but Tessa cut me off. "Save it, Cora," she said, not unkindly, but with a finality that was absolute. "I'm just telling you so you understand why some doors are permanently closed to you now." She walked away, leaving me standing alone, clutching my drink like a lifeline. Across the room, Lachlan and Juliet were preparing to leave, saying their goodbyes. He hadn't spoken a single word to me all night, hadn't even acknowledged my presence. As they passed near me on their way out, Juliet smiled politely at me. She had no idea who I was. Then Lachlan's eyes met mine for a brief fleeting moment. And I saw it. No anger, no resentment, not even discomfort. Just nothing. Complete indifference. I had become a stranger to him. That night marked the beginning of my social exile. Invitations dwindled. Friends like Rowan became perpetually busy when I suggested getting together. The story of my manipulation had spread, cementing my reputation as someone who couldn't be trusted in relationships. The toxicity, I realized, wasn't just in my love life. At work, my pattern of deception extended to taking credit for colleagues' ideas, a habit I hadn't even fully realized I had until my manager called me out on it during a performance review. "There's a concerning pattern here, Cora," she'd said, her eyes stern. "This needs to stop, or we'll have to reconsider your position with us." A week later, I ran into Rowan at a coffee shop. I hadn't seen her in months. "How are you?" I asked, genuinely hoping to reconnect. "Busy," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Look, I should go." "Wait," I said, a sudden desperation gripping me. Have you heard anything about Lachlan?" She sighed a long, tired sound. "Cora, you need to move on. He has." "I know. With Juliet," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Rowan hesitated, then seemed to decide that the direct approach was best. "They're engaged," she said softly. "He proposed last weekend." The news hit me like a physical blow. Engaged. After just 6 months together? We'd been together for a year and a half, and he'd never even hinted at marriage. As I watched Rowan leave, the full weight of what I'd lost crashed down on me. Not just Lachlan, but friends, respect, trust, all sacrificed on the altar of my own pride and insecurity. For the first time, I had to face the possibility that I might have been wrong. That my test wasn't just a harmless way to gauge Lachlan's feelings. It was a manipulative power play that revealed far more about my own character than it ever did about his. But even this realization came with a qualifier, a final, desperate attempt to shield myself from the full blame. If only he had understood what I really meant. If only he hadn't overreacted. If only he had given me a second chance. I still couldn't fully own my mistake. I couldn't accept that the consequences I was facing, the loneliness, the damaged reputation, the lost relationships, were entirely of my own making. And that's why, 6 months later, I'm still alone, watching from the periphery as life goes on without me. Lachlan is building a future with Juliet. My old friends have moved on to healthier relationships. My career has stalled, as my reputation for untrustworthiness has followed me there too. All because I broke up with him, just to see if he'd fight for me. And he didn't ask why, he just walked away. It turned out to be the smartest thing he could have done. For him, never for me.